Picture this. A global push for clean energy that's actually driving up costs and leaving everyday folks footing the bill. That's the eye-opening bombshell President Donald Trump dropped during his address at the United Nations General Assembly on September 23, 2025. In a speech that grabbed worldwide attention, he slammed what he described as the extreme cost of transitioning to green energy, claiming that exaggerated fears about climate change are hurting ordinary people while lining the pockets of the wealthy elite. Now, regardless of your take on Trump's style, he stumbled upon a hard-to-ignore reality. Despite constant promises from activists, organizations like the UN, the World Bank, and the World Economic Forum, wind and solar power aren't delivering the affordable electricity we've been led to believe. In truth, they're driving up electricity prices for everyone. For years, news outlets and environmental supporters have touted solar and wind as the most budget-friendly ways to generate electricity. This idea is at the heart of the argument that a shift to green energy is not just unavoidable, but also a win-win, even in a potential second term for Trump. But here's where it gets controversial. 2 decades of real-world data paint a completely different picture. Nations that have poured the most into solar and wind installations are the ones grappling with the steepest electricity bills. The big deception and the uncomfortable facts. The notion that solar and wind are cheap relies on a clever trick. Sure, these technologies can be competitive when the sun is out or the wind is whipping through. But modern life demands power around the clock, every single day. When the sun sets or the breeze dies down, societies turn to expensive backup sources, typically fossil fuels. When you add these backup costs into the equation, renewables turn out to be anything but inexpensive. Take a closer look at the world leaders' reactions. They chuckled and fidgeted as Trump criticized the UN on climate issues, Ukraine, and Gaza during the General Assembly. A detailed analysis of China's energy landscape revealed that the true cost of solar power is double that of coal. Studies from Germany and Texas demonstrated that after including backup expenses, solar and wind shift from seeming marginally cheaper to being several times pricier. President Donald Trump speaks at the United Nations General Assembly in New York City on September 23, 2025. Photo by Timothy A. Clary, AFP via Getty Images. This plays out directly in what consumers pay. Countries like Germany, Spain, Denmark, and the United Kingdom boast some of the globe's highest electricity rates, despite their heavy investments in renewables. In the past year, households and businesses across the European Union shelled out over 26 cents per kilowatt hour. That's more than twice the U.S. rate of 13 cents and 3 times China's. The UK, with its even more ambitious green goals, faced a staggering 36 cents per kilowatt hour, nearly triple the U.S. figure and over 4 times China's. For beginners wondering, a kilowatt hour is a unit measuring electricity use. Think of it as the energy needed to run a typical appliance for an hour. Data from the International Energy Agency across 70 nations reveals a stark trend. The more renewables a country adopts, the higher its power costs climb. Specifically, every 10% bump in wind and solar's share of the energy mix hikes average electricity prices by more than 4 cents per kilowatt hour. Days devoid of wind, or straightforward honesty, news stories frequently celebrate how places like Germany generate the bulk of their electricity from renewables. But these reports conveniently skip over the gloomy, wind-free days when solar and wind contribute next to nothing. During last winter, Germany's renewables repeatedly fell short, supplying less than 4% of the country's power for whole days at a time. Proponents argue that advanced batteries will solve this intermittency issue. Yet all of Germany's current energy storage capacity would only last about 20 minutes. The bottom line? Fossil fuels are still crucial, but since they're used less often now, their costs have skyrocketed. In November, when solar and wind were virtually absent, Germany's wholesale prices surged to $1 per kilowatt hour. As traditional power plants are phased out, the dangers escalate. A top executive from a German utility company warned that the nation dodged blackouts by a hair's breadth, thanks only to milder weather. Developing nations can't afford the fantasy. If solar and wind were genuinely more economical, poorer countries would eagerly adopt them, skipping ahead in development. Instead, the reverse is occurring. In emerging economies, electricity demand surged by nearly 5% last year, and it was largely satisfied by fossil fuels. China expanded its coal use more than its combined additions of solar and wind. Bangladesh ramped up coal by 13 times more than renewables. India, often lauded for its bold solar targets, still increased coal capacity 3 times faster than solar and wind. Even billionaire Gautam Adani, who struggled to sell a $6 billion solar venture, reportedly engaged in a $265 million bribery scandal, because many Indian states balk at depending on unpredictable renewables. These poorer nations understand that reliability is paramount. Wealthier countries can afford to chase the solar and wind dream only because they have established fossil fuel backups and generous government handouts. On May 26, 2021, solar panels stretch across the Toms River Solar Farm in New Jersey, built on an EPA Superfund site, Reuters Dane Reese. The concealed subsidy system in the U.S., Europe's inflated prices at least reflect the genuine expenses of renewables. In the United States, however, subsidies mask the true costs. Federal tax breaks for wind and solar alone totaled nearly $18 billion in 2024, with states chipping in billions extra. In Texas, overall subsidies might have hit nearly $20 billion in 2023. That's 10 times the federal amount. Nationwide, these hidden supports could top $60 billion each year, inflating actual power costs by around 25% beyond what's shown on official bills. And this is the part most people miss. These subsidies aren't just financial. They represent a massive transfer of wealth that burdens taxpayers and distorts the market. Speaking truthfully and fueling real breakthroughs, the comforting myth of affordable renewables is actually harmful. It props up a cycle of escalating bills and perpetual subsidies, disproportionately affecting the most vulnerable. As a side note, advocates keep pointing to batteries as the fix, but Germany's entire storage system would barely cover 20 minutes of need. Trump is spot on in pointing out the financial toll of current climate strategies. But the answer isn't to dismiss climate change entirely. It's to embrace wiser approaches. We need to channel efforts into innovations that can truly make green energy more cost-effective than fossil fuels. This involves pumping up funding for research and development. Think cutting-edge nuclear technologies, more dependable renewables paired with robust storage, and geothermal advancements. Such investments would be far cheaper than today's climate expenditures, and if affluent nations serious about climate action focus on innovation instead of illusions, they could spearhead a genuine green transformation, one grounded in accessible, dependable energy for everyone. Do you agree that subsidies are hiding the real costs of renewables? Or do you think they're a necessary evil to combat climate change? Is Trump's critique too harsh? Or does it highlight a truth that's been ignored? And what about poor countries? Should they be pressured to adopt renewables despite the risks? Share your opinions in the comments. I'd love to hear differing viewpoints and spark a discussion. Bjorn Lomborg is the president of the Copenhagen Consensus, a visiting fellow at Stanford University's Hoover Institution, and the author of False Alarm and Best Things First.